I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Communications Director for the Independent Contractors and Business Association. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim. And Jim, before we start, we should just mention Remembrance Day is coming up. We're very lucky to have the freedom to talk about, political issues like this, and we owe it all to those veterans who, fought for our freedom. So, yeah, this Saturday, get out to a cenotaph and say thank you to a veteran.
My father-in-law was a paratrooper for the Kent Regiment, and my mother-in-law was in the RAF, and she tells me when the Germans were threatening to invade England, the British had run out of weapons because of Dunkirk. They just got the men off, but none of their weapons. So they gave the women in the Royal Air Force field hockey sticks to repel the Germans. And I said, really? And she said, with a voice I'll never forget, you use what you have.
Beautiful.
So I could just see her rapping on a Panzer with a field hockey stick saying, Mr. Hitler, you go back to where you belong. In a very stiff British accent that still sounds very much like the Queen's. Jordan, talking about stiff accents and slings and arrows and so on, you think that people in the legislature should be allowed to go at it as they feel free?
Yeah, well, this is just kind of an annoying thing that's been happening on social media and the Speaker of the House and whatnot. There's a lot of pearl clutching and a lot of tisk-tisking about the decorum of what happens in the legislature. This just drives me crazy. It is unfair to compare what happens in the legislature to what happens in another workplace, to what happens in a school. Often the line you'll hear from people is, these school children came and saw democracy at work and they were horrified by the fighting in this thing and they would never be allowed to do this kind of behavior in their grade 4 classroom. Well, newsflash to all these pearl clutchers, it's not a grade 4 classroom. It is not the same culture as a classroom. It's not the same culture as my office I'm in today. It is the legislature. It is a historic place where these groups, where these individuals have been able to go after each other, verbally jousting. It's happened for generations. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I just tire of this constant nattering about how what a bad thing this is for democracy when there's absolutely no evidence that it is.
Well, the one thing you can't do in the legislature is call somebody a liar. That's unparliamentary language. But they have so many other creative ways of doing it.
Well, yeah, this has evolved over, centuries from the British parliamentary system, and, we keep these guys 2.5 sword lengths apart, as the legend goes, so that they can't, pull swords on each other and fight. We want them to be verbally jousting. We want harsh, tough debate. It should be tough to pass laws in this country. You should be able to debate them thoroughly, and you should be held to account. So, I laugh when I see like Spencer Chandler Herbert on Twitter, giving the BC Liberals heck for their language when the NDP did exactly the same thing. It seems the only people who ever want things to quiet down are the people who are in power. And the reason, of course, they want that is because it means they're not being held to the same tough account. So, calling someone the Minister of Disinformation, that's a long-standing parliamentary tradition. Darryl Plekas is, just completely, misread the legislature, misread the traditions of that house, and he should be the one withdrawing this silly edict, and instead just let these guys go at it, police them as far as calling each other liars and stuff like that, and let them debate the laws.
Now, one of the things that the contractors are very concerned about is the situation with the Site C dam. Right now, it's in limbo. We don't know if they're going to stop it, repair it. or continue with it? What's your position?
Well, we're very strongly in the finish the job camp. So the one thing we know is that they're not going to stall it. The money, the costs are just exorbitant for that. The NDP would just be absolutely pilloried for that. And frankly, it would be one of those situations where, the NDP, you have to realize that they're going to anger one part of the electorate or the other. Stalling it just makes everyone mad. And that's probably the worst case scenario for a premier who's trying to plot his way to a majority government. So they'll either keep it or kill it. The initial rush of feedback after the BCUC issued the report last week, and frankly, the media should kind of be held to account a little bit here. They really jumped in with the opponent's interpretation of the facts in that report. But if you actually look at the report and take the time to digest it, you realize that the case for Site C is very strong. So what the BCUC did is considered three different scenarios as far as how much more power British Columbia is going to need. If we need a lot more power, kind of the high scenario, Site C by a factor of several $1 billion is the best way to go. If we need a medium amount of power in order to meet all these obligations, Site C is still the very best deal by a factor of a few $1 billion. And if we happen to not need too much more power, then yes, it's possible with some risks that aren't really laid out in the plan that, wind and solar could maybe cost about the same as Site C. Well, the fact of the matter is this report went hard on, we're not going to need that much more power when it doesn't take into account our commitments under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, doesn't take into account that Gregor Robertson and Vision Vancouver are banning fossil fuels in Vancouver by 2050. They're going to need double the power. Doesn't take into account the electric vehicle revolution. Doesn't take into account all these, fancy new electronics. Doesn't take into account the fact that the NDP have rejected time of day billing, where, you have to pay more for power after dinner in order to manage demand. So, the BCUC kind of says, oh, we don't think we'll need that much more power. That's just utter nonsense. At the very least, we're going to need that mid-level power, which makes Site C the best deal by far.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after the break.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, the BC government is freezing hydro hikes for the time being. Is that good for business?
Well, what business has been wanting for a long time is to see the PST come off of the hydro rates. That is in the works, so that's good news. The hydro rate freeze, I'm of two minds on. If you're going to freeze rates and you're going to make up that money by finding efficiencies within BC Hydro, then great. We're all for that. Or if, you're not taking money out of BC Hydro as a dividend and putting it into general government, great. Perfect, yeah, freeze the rates. The problem is the NDP are very unclear as to where that money is coming from. The second point is they actually aren't able to unilaterally decide this. They actually have to, get the permission of the BC Utilities Commission. And you'll recall these are the same people, the NDP were like vetting as the energy gurus and, the most important experts on the planet when it comes to Site C. And how dare the Liberals just announce Site C without vetting it by the BCUC? Now you have the NDP, cutting the BCUC out of the decision on hydro rates. So, it's just more kind of hypocrisy from John Horgan and Michelle Mungal. They need to really, you haven't really settled into the fact that, they should be held accountable for the promises they made in the election and for the criticisms they've been making of the Liberals for all these years. So yeah, hydro rates, look, if you can find the efficiencies, great. Yeah, freeze my rates. I'd be over the moon. I'm skeptical, though, that that's the path the NDP will take.
The Kinder Morgan pipeline has received federal approval, but Now, because of environmental rulings and protests, the project's way off schedule. What's that doing to people who work in that business?
Well, it's got a lot of concern in the construction industry and a lot of frustration with the federal government. To her credit, Rachel Notley, the NDP Premier of Alberta, she's on her way to British Columbia this month. She's going to speak at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade, speaking at a couple other places, making the case to British Columbians about why this is such an important national project and why it needs to be expedited. Of course, we have Burnaby dragging their heels. They're locked up now in regulatory battles with Kinder Morgan, who quite rightly says that Burnaby is taking too long. What frustrates me is that, we have Rachel Notley coming, but, the the great leader of our nation, the besocked one, Justin Trudeau, can't be bothered to come to British Columbia and explain, make the case for Kinder Morgan. His government approved it, actually flip-flopped on a campaign promise, approved the project. Something obviously changed his mind. Why has he not come to British Columbia and explained why to, the many opponents of this project and, tried to help move them to supporting it? Why is the Natural Resource Minister, Jim Carr, why is he sitting out of these, regulatory, hearings, between Burnaby and Kinder Morgan? If you support the project, support it. Get in there and let's get it done. From our point of view, it's a national project. It has to happen. It's been through incredible vetting. But I just don't understand why Justin Trudeau can't be bothered to come to BC and speak out on it.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, one thing I haven't heard much about is the replacement for the Massey Tunnel, which is 50 years old and in an earthquake would collapse most likely. Have you heard anything about the conduit over the Fraser or under the Fraser between Delta and Richmond?
Yeah, so very, very quietly, over the past few days, we've heard that they've hired someone to do an independent technical review of the Massey Tunnel. Now, the person involved, and I'm just pulling up his name here now because it was not a name that was familiar to many of us in the construction industry. His name is Stan Cowdell. He's the president of Westmar Project Advisors, Inc. It's a North Shore company. And Cowdell is in charge of reviewing, all the documentation. Now, I would say, look, we've been studying this for years. We have literally thousands and thousands of pages of documentation. The NDP government just didn't materialize overnight. They've been looking at this project for a long time, in opposition. They should know whether or not this is good. But, they're going to pay Cowdell $350,000, single sourced, and, see what he thinks. Interestingly, Cowdell does not show up on an NDP donor list. He has, in the kind of the Campbell era, he did give several $1,000s to the BC Liberals. That indicates that maybe he's, a little bit more of a, building kind of guy, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. The bottom line is the information is, pretty clear as far as we're concerned, certainly as far as the mayor of Delta is concerned. The only reason the NDP have stalled this is because the mayors aren't on board. And of course the mayors aren't on board because they don't get the money for this tunnel. This tunnel, if it was a TransLink tunnel, it would be their number one priority, but because it's not TransLink tunnel and they have no real, skin in the game, they could care less about the Massey Tunnel and in fact, openly advocate against it.
What does it do to people trying to plan businesses and construction, especially when they don't know what's going to happen with all of these mega projects?
It absolutely corrodes investor confidence. You just think about how you want to have, you go for it. There's a lot of risks in business. Everyone understands that. And, you can't control everything, can't control the economy, but you make your best educated decisions as far as you can. So when government flip-flops on things like Site C, when they, try to go to court to stop a federally approved project like Kinder Morgan, when they stall out the Massey Tunnel, investors get nervous. They quite rightly start to wonder if they can be, if they can manage that risk. Frankly, most of the time with this NDP government, I don't think you can manage the risk. They're just too unpredictable and too beholden to the professional protesters and the Green Party to actually do the right thing for the economy. So, it's a very scary time. And, for us in the construction industry, we're not the companies doing the big investments. We're the ones who build the stuff, when people come and invest. Very concerning for us because, all our guys want to do is go to work, build British Columbia, and when we have a government who does not seem as terribly committed to it as they should be, it makes them nervous.
What about other projects? I'm wondering why hasn't the government said, well, we should get the rapid transit line out to UBC built. How about putting rapid transit out into the valley? Things like that.
Yeah, those have all kind of gone quiet. No big announcements. I think the NDP are suddenly realized they don't have as much money as they thought they did. They cut the MSP tax, which is great. I'm all for that. They cut in half. But there's other costs that they've dropped and, nothing is, or added and they haven't even gone to their big stuff, daycare, housing, all of that. A great piece by Frank Buchholz, the former editor of the Langley Times, talking about, confused as to why they're taking so long to get schools going in Surrey. This is a government that said by the end of their term, there won't be a single child in a portable in a school in Surrey. Well, to do that, they have to build the equivalent of 20 or 25 schools over the next, now, 3.5 years. Number one, I don't think Surrey has enough space for that many schools. I don't think they have enough land locked up. And number two, construction doesn't happen overnight. As much as, as good as our guys are, you just can't magically materialize these things. You need to get going on this sooner than later. But, there are a lot of talk right now in the NDP government, not a lot of walk.
Jordan, anything else you wanted to add right now? Do you feel that the business is in a state of confusion when it comes to dealing with the NDP government?
Yeah, I think business is very nervous. Everyone, different industries have different kind of fights, right? So I know the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, the tourism industry is very worried about the Fair Wage Commission. Fair wage sounds so lovely, doesn't it? Like, oh, everyone should be paid fairly. Well, of course. But, if you're talking about raising minimum wage by $3 or $4 an hour, it's going to cripple some businesses. If you actually want to get to a living wage, which for the city of Vancouver would probably be more like $22 an hour, you're going to put a bunch of people out of business and lose a lot of jobs. So, for that hospitality industry, they're all over that. That doesn't really affect construction that much because, talking to our companies, we can't find anyone who works on a construction site for, even $15 and under. It's a well-paid industry. But there are other things. They're reviewing the labor code. That concerns us in construction. It should concern tech companies because the NDP in the 1990s, for example, tried to bring in sectoral bargaining where, if one Starbucks had unionized, then every barista in the province would be put automatically under that agreement, whether they wanted to or not, whether the company could afford it or not, and whether it was right for them or not. These are things that could still creep back from the NDP because they're so beholden to the labor movement that poured millions and millions and millions of dollars into their party over the past 15, 16 years. So there's lots to chew on. This government loves to review, and I can tell you, our policy vice president here at ICBA is busy, daily preparing briefs and submissions to all these different reviews. It's been a lot.
Have you heard anything about the purpose of the Site C dam being to export water to California?
Yeah, that's utter nonsense. That's more crazy. Stop and think. How does a dam, first of all, in a river that already has two dams, why would the third dam, in the northeastern British Columbia, suddenly allow us to export water to California? It's crazy talk. It was some report in the 60s that never went anywhere and has been thoroughly debunked several times over. But, these Site C people, anti-Site C people, they're not known for their facts. They're known more for their fake news. And they'll throw everything they can at the wall to try to find something that'll stick to get the government to cancel Site C.
I also don't know how you would do it. I mean, the river flows north.
Yeah. Well,
it goes through my hometown of Peace River.
It's crazy. There's so many problems with this idea, right? But they do this all the time. There's this myth out there that, this farmland that's going to be flooded could, feed 1 million people. Well, that's been thoroughly and utterly debunked several times over by actual real experts. It could maybe feed 40,000 people, maybe, but more like 1,700 is kind of the number that most people settle on. You know, you take the power from the Site C Dam, you're going to have a lot more jobs and a lot of electricity that can be used in food production. You'll feed way more people with the electricity from that space. You're talking about 0.2% of the farmland in the piece. If that can feed 1 million people, the piece alone should be feeding, you know, basically 1 billion people across the planet. Like, it's just, but, you know, this is what they do, right? Like, you know, they claim that the government came in and stole the land of, these owners, you know, but, you know, those owners actually have known for decades that, you know, this is land that, you know, belongs to BC Hydro. They've had leases. It was expropriated a long time ago. It just isn't true. But, you know, when you're desperate to try to fight something, and for most people, they're only fighting it because either they hate LNG and they think somehow that, you know, this electricity could be used for an LNG plant, although that seems unlikely at this point. Or they hate the BC Liberals and Christy Clark and they just want to, you know, kill every kind of part of their legacy. It's not really rooted in any kinds of facts.
If the Site C Dam was built to provide power to BC only, would it still be a good idea?
If the Site C Dam was built for LNG power only?
No, well, to provide power for British Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the big secret right now is we're actually an importer of electricity the past couple of years. We've imported more than we've exported. You know, if Site C, it's a 100-year project. We're heading into electric car revolution. We're going to need more power. Yeah, we'll need solar and wind and all these things. But let's not forget, a lot of these people are the same people who are, you know, crying and moaning about Campbell's independent power producer program, saying it was too expensive and too boutique and yada yada yada, you know, too invasive in the environment. Some of these people just hate, you know, any kind of resource development and progress, and anything they can do to stuff it out, they're going to try to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it hard to understand people who are against both a hydro project and against an oil pipeline. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim.
My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Communications Director for the Independent Contractors and Business Association, their website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for the show or our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.